Welcome to the podcast. I'm excited for what I think is going to be a passionate conversation about
hmm
the power of podcast guesting and how that can help us elevate our businesses.
Thank you, Angela. I'm so excited to be here talking to my fellow mompreneurs. I'm a mompreneur as well. So I absolutely know that life. And you said it, I am a super passionate person about what I do. And I just get really excited, particularly thinking about helping other women step more into their visibility and into their power. Because
Mhm.
let's be honest, we get told to be quiet a bunch. We get told to kind of sit in the
Yep.
corner a bunch, you know?
Yep.
And I'm here to say no.
Yeah.
Let's figure out how to do that because there's a lot of people out there that want to hear from you.
So let's start out with just talking about what inspired you to go into the field of podcast PR
Mhm.
and how has it supercharged your business?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I've been in PR, the PR and marketing world for almost 20 years.
Mhm.
So really working in-house at agents, in-house and at agencies,
Mhm.
doing PR, marketing, events, like all that kind of good stuff. I had my daughter in 2014, and at that point, I was a senior account exec for a PR agency, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm good here. And I actually never thought that I would be like that. My
Mhm.
mom worked full time. I just assumed that I would also work full time once I had a kid. And luckily, I had the ability to not be able, like, not have to do that. And so
Mhm.
I was like, all right, I'm going to hang out with my kid for a little bit.
Mhm.
And so we did that for the first year. And then I started to consult. My particular area of expertise was tourism PR.
Mhm.
So I had, these destinations and things like that reaching out to me to do contract work because they had worked with me before. And I was like, cool, cool, I did this. And then, guys, this is going to be kind of a little bit like of a journey story, but I promise it gets to where I am. So buckle up. But I was like, oh, you know what? I drank the Kool-Aid and I was like, I'm gonna do a course. I'm gonna do a course that's gonna make me $1 million in my sleep. Like, I'm not gonna have to do anything perfect, wonderful. I've done it. I've solved the equation, right? And so I was like, I'm going to do a course about tourism PR. I do all this consulting work for these destinations. I speak on stages talking about it, etc. Let's have this, let's kind of move into this arena. And y'all, I did it. Like, I did all the steps. I followed someone that's really well known in that world. And by God, I got it done. And in the way that they were teaching it at that time, and I do not know if they still teach it that way, but this was like 2018-ish, let's say 2017, 2018. The way that they taught to promote your course was to spend a lot of money on ads, have
Mhm.
it go to a live webinar, and then sell in email. Okay.
Mhm.
So this was kind of how they were saying this is how you make sales. Okay. And I want to be very clear on this. Even though I taught publicity, I
Mhm.
did no publicity for my course. Okay. Because I was like, well, this is how they say to do it. So, like, this is how it is. So I guess I better need to go and do it. So I dump all this money in and I have this launch and I sell like two, right?
Mhm.
Like it doesn't sell well. And I remember my husband at the time was like, so like what are we doing here? And I was like, shut up. Like I was like, I will figure this out. You know what I mean? And
Uh-huh.
so I tapped back into my intuition and I was like, Christina, you have sent thousands of pitches before,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
in your career, in your life, etc. So like what could you start pitching to now? And like I said, this was around 2017, 2018. So podcasts were a thing, but
Mhm.
they weren't the thing they are now.
Mhm.
They weren't just a part of everybody's life like they are now. But I started to get myself booked on these podcasts that got in front of destination tourism professionals, right? And I saw a complete 180. People just buying my course, right? Right off the shelf. People asking me about more consulting, asking me to speak, etc. And that was all because I was getting in front of those ideal audiences
Mhm.
and building that know, like, and trust factor dramatically by doing that, right?
Mhm.
So I did that for a couple years and then COVID hit.
Mhm.
And when COVID hit, you can imagine tourism dollars went away. And so I saw pretty quickly, even remember those glorious like 3 weeks when they're like, well, I'll just stay home for three
Right.
weeks and then you'll be able to just go about your life, whatever. Yeah. Even then I knew tourism was going to take a big hit, but
Yeah.
obviously then seeing that being extended, I was like, okay, we're done here. Like these destinations are just trying to literally keep their doors open. Like
Right.
they're trying to keep their staff on, and I don't blame them for that.
Yeah.
That's what their priority is right then. And so I had kind of already had this inkling to start teaching others how to get booked on podcasts because I'd seen such success in my business. And so it kind of gave me the push I needed to do that.
Hmm.
And so I started teaching people, and this was great during COVID because you could just do it from home,
Right.
right? People could just do, Angela and I, we're just sitting in our home offices, right?
Yep.
Like we don't have to go somewhere, we don't have to do something. So that worked really well. And by the end of that year, so the end of 2020, I just had so many people that were like, no, 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 this is great. This is great. Could you just do it though? And I kind of fought against it for a while, but then I started to pitch on people's behalf. And then a month or two later, hired my first publicist and grew to the agency that we have today.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, I was going to ask you, like, tell people, try to explain the power of podcasting. And you just in your intro there, demonstrated that, you have created a whole business around it. And
Yes.
so I would love to talk about what are some insights on how people should begin to identify or think about their ideal podcast to guest
Mhm.
on.
Yeah. Great question. Great question. So there's a couple kind of tips that I have for folks, like when they're kind of starting to think about what are those podcasts that would make sense for me to go on.
Yeah.
So the main thing I want you to think about is who is my ideal audience?
Mhm.
And when we talk about our ideal audience, by the way, for the most part, that is not your peers.
Mm.
That is people that can learn from you, that are going to give you money. And I think this is a
Mhm.
very important distinction. You could be
Mhm.
on a lot of podcasts, and that's great for your ego. Okay.
Mhm.
But I am not telling you to go on podcasts for your ego. I am telling you to go on podcasts to make money. And
Mhm.
that means you need to be thinking about it very, very strategically. Okay. So
Mhm.
thinking about where are those audiences that I want to get in front of, right?
Mhm.
So like for instance, and a good example of this is I had this wonderful woman that I met at an event and she was a homesteader, right? So
Mhm.
that's what she did.
Mhm.
And she has courses on that. She had like a membership, etc. And she was like, "Well, I've already been on like all the homesteading podcasts, that there are." And I was like, "Girl, I don't want you on homesteading podcasts. Like if you want to go on homesteading podcasts, that's great. Like if
Mhm.
you want to go on your buddy's podcast and like talk about that, that's wonderful. But what I want you on is parenting podcasts. I want you on other podcasts where you are just talking about, hey, what are some ways that you can bring in a couple things from the homesteading lifestyle into your regular life, right? Like I particularly think moms, parents, etc., like we're looking for ways to kind of get back to those roots, right? Those
Mhm.
the more organic, like use that term kind of as you will in this sense, but like
Mhm.
form of living, parenting, right, etc. So I'm like, go on these shows and talk about what are a couple tips that people can do to bring a little bit of that back into their life. They're not saying they're gonna go off the grid and become homesteaders, but like you have so much knowledge that
Right.
you can be sharing with people in that way.
Mhm.
So that's an example of just shifting that in your mind of like
Mhm.
who I think I need to get in front of versus like who's going to actually give me money or visit my website or become an
Mhm.
actual lead in my business, right?
Mhm.
And so I think that's a really important thing there to think. When it comes to actually finding shows that kind of fit in that, one of the easiest things I tell people to do, or the quickest things I tell people to do, and I'll say right now, if you're listening to this episode, you have 48 hours to complete this. You need to reach out to your audience. That can be on social media, that can be e-newsletter, whatever, and ask what podcasts they listen to. So
Mhm.
go to your audience that you already have and be like, hey, besides this show, obviously, what are you guys listening to out there? And you're going to get
Mhm.
some ideas. You're, of course, going to get some that don't make sense for what you do. Someone's going to send you a true crime, someone's going to send
Right.
you, something else. That's fine. But
Uh-huh.
there could very well be some gems in there
Mhm.
that you wouldn't have known about or you wouldn't have heard about. Another
Mhm.
idea is like any groups that you're a part of, go into those groups and be like, I'm really think I'm getting serious about guesting. I'd love to be a guest on someone's show, maybe have a couple topics and the audiences you want to get in front of. and see if either them or they know somebody that they could introduce you to,
Mm-hmm.
where you could potentially go on their show, right? There's over 1 million podcasts out there.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a ton of opportunity, but don't get hung up on like, I got to be on Amy Porterfield. I got to be on,
Yes.
Jenna Kutcher. I got to be on Pat Flynn. No, you don't. And especially
Yeah.
not you're never going to do that as like your first podcast. Okay.
Right.
So get on these shows. It's okay if they're small, as long
Mm-hmm.
as they're the right audience, it is still well worth your time.
Mm-hmm. I think that that's a wonderful recommendation, not only on how to get suggestions, but also people think that they have to be on these podcasts that have massive audiences to get some traction.
Yep,
And especially as a new entrepreneur, are you really like, let's say that happened, do you really have the systems in place to handle all of that?
exactly.
Is
Exactly. Do you have that in place? Is
right.
that even, it doesn't mean that isn't a great goal.
Yeah,
That doesn't mean that that's
absolutely.
not a great, like, hey, I would love to be on this podcast down the road. But I'll tell you right now, and this is 100% true, and I got the case studies to back it up. My clients make way more money on niched shows that
Mm-hmm.
are full of their ideal audience, as opposed, we've gotten our clients on some big shows. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not saying that that isn't valuable, that that isn't great to have that association with that
Mm-hmm.
person, etc. But with straight up cash in hand,
Mm-hmm.
they see more being on those niche podcasts, or they see more quicker, I should
Mm-hmm.
say.
Mm-hmm. I think that that's such a valuable information. It's so let's talk about when we actually get on that show. And I've been a part of people who guess who've maybe not maximized the opportunity and all of those things. And one of the things that you are obviously good at is incorporating a story because you told your own story here
Mhm.
in the intro. But how can, once you have that opportunity, really
Mhm.
maximize it?
Well, you nailed it. Stories are definitely a big thing, whether it's your personal story, it's the story of a client, like a client success that you've had. Those are really, really great. Or even like that example I gave of that homesteader that I met, right? Just
Mhm.
like having examples that really showcase to someone or like highlight that thing is really great. The
Mhm.
other things that I would say is make sure you have a great call to action at the end. Make sure you have a place that you are directing people that is not
Mhm.
just your website. Okay. Um, I'm not saying don't send people to a landing page. That's what I
Mhm.
recommend, or that's what I do
Mhm.
with my clients. But
Mhm.
you want to try to capture info or get them in your world somehow, right? So
Mhm.
whether that's sending them to a page that has a freebie, which means
Mhm.
they get on your email list, maybe they can sign up for a call,
Mhm.
follow you on social media or connect with you, somewhere there. Um, there's a bunch of different ways to kind of do that, but our end
Mhm.
goal is that we are trying to get these people in our world, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So that we can nurture them, or they can become leads, they can become clients, etc.
Mhm.
So I think that that's like a really important thing to remember is you don't have to
Mhm.
overcomplicate it. It can literally just be, like I said, a landing page that has like a freebie on it, and
Mhm.
then a way for people to book a call with you, right?
Mhm.
And do it as a really easy URL. Like I recommend, like what we have is like publicity by Christina /booked, right? Or
Mhm.
something like that. You could just have /podcast. You know what I mean? Something really easy that you're not going to forget, A,
Mhm.
when you're on there and you're talking about it.
Mhm.
But secondarily, it would be easy enough for someone to just type in. I mean, it's going to be in the show notes, but you don't want to have
Mhm.
some like crazy thing that you're trying to direct people to. Make it easy. I don't necessarily think, especially at the beginning of doing this work, that you need to have like a separate landing page for each show that you're on. I think that
Oh.
that's absolutely not necessary. People will be like, "Oh, so should I have one for?" I'm like, "Absolutely not. No." Like, I do not think that that is necessary. Just have one page that you're directing
Mhm.
people to. The beauty of that also is people listen to podcasts a year later, two
Right.
years later, right? They are still going to be able to go to that URL and there will be an active page. Okay.
Mhm.
You may have changed out the freebie. That's fine.
Mhm.
But there is still a page there that someone's going to be able to go to and be on your list, book a
Mhm.
call with you, etc.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that that's so valuable. And so, what are some of the mistakes that you think, other than maybe not having that? opt in, or kind of a
Mhm.
strategy to kind of guide listeners who connect with them on the interview? What are maybe some of the other mistakes that guests might be making?
I think that a big mistake that guests make is thinking that the podcast interview is it.
Yes.
And I think that's a huge one. The podcast
Yeah.
interview is one part of this
Right.
strategy.
Yeah.
A lot of people get really like, oh, I did the interview and then I hit end on Zoom and never to think of it again.
Right.
Okay. And no. That's like one sliver of the pie. And so I think a lot of people overlook the strategy.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is you're going to have this episode, it's going to go out. That's great. You need to share it. So when it goes live, you need to share it on your channels, tag the host, okay?
Hmm.
So they know that you did that. Then you need to create a whole bunch of content off of it, right? So I
Hmm.
want you to be creating more social media posts, a blog post. Blog posts, I always say, do not sleep on blog posts, y'all.
Oh no.
Do a blog post for any guest interview that you do. And by the way, if you've already been on a bunch of shows, go back and hire someone on Fiverr, use ChatGPT, create blog posts for those shows and put them up. It's still worthwhile, okay, for you
Hmm.
to do that and backlink
Hmm.
to the host, right? That's
Hmm.
what's going to really build that up for you to backlink to that in that way. So you should be creating content. That's stuff that you can be sharing over and over and over again. I think
Hmm.
people sometimes get a little hung up on like, well, it's not my show. Yeah, you're giving credit as to like what show you're
Right.
on, but
Hmm.
once it's published, it's out there, right? Like
Right.
you're not publishing anything that the host didn't want. And in fact, I mean, Angela, I think you can back me up here.
Yeah.
Any host is going to be happy that you're sharing it even more.
Oh yeah, like I get like, is it okay if I share like your artwork? I'm like,
Yeah,
yes, this is like what it's
please.
all about.
Yeah,
Please do.
yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think going back to like looking for podcasts to be on, it just reminded me that you should also want to be on a podcast that creates a lot of content as well.
That's a great point. Yeah.
And not just sharing. I mean, we have a YouTube channel, we create shorts, we share it on
I
Instagram, we
love
share it
that.
on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. So think too about where they're publishing. Make sure they're actually publishing to Apple and
Hmm.
Spotify and all of those places like that. So that you're investing your time in somebody who's going to also share what you're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the other part of the strategy that I really want to talk about is like this host relationship. A lot
Mhm.
of like, I would almost say this is the biggest mistake I see. And it's something that I coach my clients on all the time about this. Because where I make a lot of my money off podcast guesting is definitely like I a guest on a show and then leads come through and sometimes people, purchase our training or they sign up for a discovery call or something like that. That's great. But what happens for me a lot of times and what I really advocate is like going and potentially teaching in a host group, right? So
Mhm.
once I've been a guest on the podcast, that host and I have a deeper relationship, right? We've had a conversation. They know me, they know my vibe, they know my level of expertise. And
Right.
so I say to them at the end, like, just hot tip, Angela, get ready. We'll hit, end and record. And then I say the magic phrase, which is, now what value can I provide for you?
Yeah.
Okay. And I come with ideas, right?
Mhm.
So I'm like, hey, I know you have a membership. Would it make sense for me to come and do a little training in there? I know you have a mastermind. Could that make sense to do a Q&A? I know you do LinkedIn lives regularly. I'd love to do one with you and be able to get you in front of my audience. You know what I mean? In
Mhm.
that way, if you have a podcast, that's something that you can, offer to them as well, right?
Yeah.
That is how I would say the
Yeah.
bulk of my money off podcasting is made is when
Mhm.
I am then go into like even a deeper group with that host, right?
Yep.
Because those are people that while they're podcast listeners absolutely trust the host, those are people that are spending money with that
Mhm.
host. Like they trust them
Mhm.
so much that they are
Mhm.
paying them, right?
Mhm.
So when I come into their world and they hear from me even more, that's just on a different level, right?
Mhm.
For them.
Mhm.
Like even in we're writing a case study about it right now, but I think it was like on the one of the like in November and December, I did two private trainings in groups based off podcasts. I made over $10,000,
Mhm.
right? So like these are the types of things that I want you to be thinking about too, is like it's
Mhm.
not just that just the interview. There's so many other things that come from that. And I think that's a huge mistake that people make.
Hmm. Thank you for saying that. Because, I mean, here I am, I've had a conversation with somebody for more than a half hour. We've already worked together to coordinate the conversation
Hmm.
and thought about what we're going to talk about and all of these things. And I'm like, oh, but there's so much more we could do. But if that person just goes radio silent for whatever
Hmm.
reason, and we all have things that come up, that's totally fine. But it is a lot of missed opportunity if you don't continue to nurture that relationship. Um,
Hmm.
you know, I've even become a client of my podcast
Yes,
guests.
I definitely have podcast hosts that I work with that have become clients of ours. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So, but two, I think ultimately you're showing up to serve and thinking
Hmm.
about the value that you're adding and
Yes.
having that mindset instead of like, I really want to connect with her audience and, I want all of them to be my clients.
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely a service over self-promotion is how you should
Mhm.
look at every guesting opportunity, right?
Mhm.
You are there for that. And by the way, some like hosts, you're going to have different relationships with different hosts, right? Like I
Mhm. Oh
always say
yeah.
this, I'm like, some hosts are going to be like a one night stand and some are going to be like a long-term relationship. And I
Right.
both have value.
Uh-huh.
Okay. That
Sure.
doesn't
Yeah.
mean that neither are worthwhile. It just means that there's going to be different levels involved,
Mhm.
obviously,
Mhm.
right? So some
Yeah.
people you're going to do the interview, you're grateful to get in front of their audience, but maybe you just don't really hit it off. That's okay,
Mhm.
whatever. And then other people you're going to be like, "Oh my God, we are like kindred spirits. Like this is it. Like this is my,
Right.
this is someone that I like have to, know or have to be a part of,
Mhm.
etc." So be prepared for that too. There
Sure.
again, there's going to be things that doesn't mean you're still not you are still sharing the episode. You are still doing all the
Oh,
things we talked
yeah.
about. Absolutely. But there's going to be different opportunities with different people, but I
Mhm.
mean for some of our clients like one of our clients Danielle, she was on a guest on a podcast and they're one of her biggest referral sources. Like
Mhm.
that particular host is.
Oh, yeah.
They even have her come and talk at their annual event each year.
Mhm.
Like there is so much opportunity that you don't even know, but you
Mhm.
have to like get out there, have this conversation with someone, and
Mhm.
being a guest on the podcast is a great way to have like a real conversation with them.
Mhm. Yeah, and you're building this network,
Yeah.
which is what you alluded to, but it is the greatest networking opportunity, honestly. You can go
Hmm.
to an event and you might meet people, you might hand out a few business cards, but you might not be it's really conducive to building those relationships
Right.
so I love that you make that statement and remind
Yeah.
listeners because it is so much more than just the interview. So
Yes.
I love that. Well, we also want to make sure that I was going to ask you things about how we can build connections and sustain our presence, but I think that you really alluded to a lot of that already by creating a blog post and
Hmm.
sharing the episode and creating more content around it. But is there
Hmm.
anything else that you might want to add to that?
I mean, I think the key is like, this is work you need to be doing consistently. I think a thing that people say to me a lot is like, I'll speak at an event or something and they'll be like, well, I was on a couple of podcasts and it didn't really do anything, for me. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
well, like, how many podcasts were you on? And they're like, I was on two, or whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, two podcasts isn't really going to move the needle that much in your business. And, this is something that you have to be doing consistently to
Hmm.
see the results that you are wanting to see. You need to commit
Right.
to it, right? And one thing we talked about before we kind of hit record is I set a visibility KPI.
Hmm.
So I have a key performance indicator in my business, which is for me personally, I want to be in front of a new audience
Hmm.
one time a week on average. Okay.
Ooh.
So that is my personal visibility KPI. The
Mm-hmm.
lowest I kind of want you to go is once every 2 weeks.
Mm.
Okay. But you can think about what that looks like in your business. But I think that it's important to set and understand that that's an average, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
going to be
Yeah.
weeks where, because I like to batch my podcast recordings,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
like when I'm a guest. And so meaning like I might do three in 1 week, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So with that in mind, I've kind of hit 3 weeks worth of
Mm-hmm.
goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that. So don't feel like it has to be like, oh, well, I already have something this week. So next week I need to whatever.
Right.
We're looking at it on average. But podcast guesting is one of the easiest ways to
Yeah.
do that. And because
Mm-hmm.
to me, that visibility KPI is getting in front of a new audience
Mm-hmm.
and talking about what it is that you do.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be podcast guesting, but
Mm-hmm.
that can be other things too. That can
Mm-hmm.
be going to a local networking event. That could be
Mm-hmm.
going to a big event, right? Like you
Mm-hmm.
you fly and you go somewhere. I
Yeah.
personally travel a bunch to
Mm-hmm.
go to events. So like that's certainly something you that we could be talking about or doing. That could be
Mm-hmm.
you doing a guest blog post, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
maybe doing like a guest e-newsletter or
Mm-hmm.
something for someone else. Like there are a lot of different ways to do that. It doesn't have to be podcasts, but
Mm-hmm.
podcasts are a really like probably what I would say would be like the easiest in the sense of like your time
Yeah.
to be hitting those goals. But I tell
Right.
you right now, like if you set that goal for yourself and let's say you decide you're going to be on you have the time so you're like all right, I'm going to do uh every other week on average,
Mm-hmm.
so 24 opportunities over the next year, your business is going to look different. If you
Mm-hmm.
are taking advantage of those opportunities and really looking at it strategy wise, I think
Mm-hmm.
one of the biggest mistakes, particularly people that are newer entrepreneurs make, is they don't get out there enough. They're
Right.
way too focused on working in their business
Mm-hmm.
and not on their business, but your
Mm-hmm.
business will not grow if you
Mm-hmm.
are not getting in front of new audiences regularly.
Right. And podcasting is long form content, like you said, that's going to sit there. And it's like,
Mhm.
if you're deciding whether you should do some more social media posts or be a podcast guest, I think it would be way more beneficial to do something like be a podcast guest that because it's going to sit there and people are going to find it
I
over
have a lot
time.
of thoughts on that, Angela, that I can go off on. I people talk to me a lot and they're like, "Well, I just need to be on social media more." No, you don't.
Yeah.
No, you don't. I am here to tell you, like, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to like
Yeah.
step on anyone's toes, but social media is not a new audience for you.
Right.
Unless someone knows you, like I think so to be clear, I have social media channels. Like
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
like social. Like I'm
Hmm.
not here to say like I don't and then I
Yeah.
live off the grid and I don't do any no, like not at all. I am on socials, but I use it as a relationship tool. I
Hmm.
do not use it as a lead generation tool.
Hmm.
I have never gotten a lead off of Instagram. Like I will tell you that right now. Have I gotten podcast bookings off Instagram?
Hmm.
Yes. Have I built relationships with people through
Hmm.
Instagram? Absolutely.
Hmm.
But in my opinion, it is not really getting seen by
Yeah.
by at least large new audiences,
Hmm.
right? And the
Hmm.
people that it may be getting in front of aren't even probably the right fit for what it is that I do if they were to stumble across something, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
all I'm saying is I'm not saying don't have social, don't do social,
Hmm.
etc. But do
Yeah.
not think that just upping your social is going to get you in front of new people. It's not.
Yeah.
Um, unless
I've
something goes viral or something
yeah.
happens in that way. But like,
I've had posts go viral and
yeah.
it
But did it
absolutely
make you money?
leads to no.
Exactly. Exactly. That's like my big thing. I say to people, they're like, oh, well, I actually had a post get seen by 2 million people. Cool. Did you make money? No. Okay. Well, like, I mean, I'm not trying to be rude, but like figure, like, think about it. Like what is more worth your time
Right.
then? You
Exactly.
know what I mean? Like,
What's the point of why we're doing this?
exactly. Exactly. Is it, I mean, let's bring it back to what I said at the beginning. Is it ego or
Mm,
is it you actually making money?
right.
Right.
Hmm.
And that's what I want you to think about and kind of have
Hmm.
that strategy in there thinking about it. But yeah, if your thought is I'm just gonna be on like I will like feel free to DM me because I will talk you down off that ledge. Because to me that ain't it.
Hmm.
Again, I love socials. But if you like to me, that's not visibility.
Hmm.
That's brand building, which is
Hmm.
also very, very good, but
Hmm.
it is not, that's not going to go on your visibility KPI. Okay. I'm
Hmm.
just telling you right now. If you were to do an
Yeah.
Instagram live with someone and
Mm-hmm.
like do, or like a LinkedIn live with someone, that
Mm-hmm.
is going on your visibility tracker tool. I will
Mm.
allow that. I
I
will
love
allow
that.
that. Because you're getting in front of a new, you are
Yeah.
like going live, getting in front of a new audience.
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn lives, y'all, if you're on LinkedIn, like I really think LinkedIn lives are where it's at.
Hmm.
That's like one thing that I think LinkedIn, first of all, is like I have made money off LinkedIn. I will say that.
Yeah.
So I definitely think LinkedIn is a little bit of a different beast.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also a great place to then be putting the clips from you being a guest on shows, etc., going on there, making money in that way. And then, like I said, if there's like a host that you notice they also do a LinkedIn live, cool. I would love to also do a LinkedIn live with you so that we can get you in front of my connections on LinkedIn too,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But absolutely, like that is a different beast. But when we're talking
Mm-hmm.
just about posting,
Mm-hmm.
no for your visibility KPI. No,
Love it.
no,
Love it. I'm so
yeah.
glad you're just saying it and not.
I'm just gonna say it like it. That's one thing my
Yeah.
clients know about. That's one thing I love about me is I'm just gonna say it like it is. And the question I'm gonna ask is, are you making money?
Right.
Is it
Right.
making you money?
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's not making you money, then and if you're doing it consistently
Mm-hmm.
and it's not paying off for you, then why are you doing it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's take a little time and talk about being a mom and balancing all of this
Yeah.
that you're doing for your clients and, running your business. So what are the things that you kind of use or maybe you're loving right now because it's a continual process?
It is a continual process. Absolutely. We're always evolving and
Yeah.
learning for sure.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I'm like that's always happening. So I have one child. I have a 10-year-old daughter.
Hmm.
And she has special needs. So she has
Hmm.
autism, ADHD, developmental delay. And so it is challenging. It is very, very challenging
Hmm.
to be a parent and to also run a business.
Hmm.
But I also know that, and I'm very grateful for the fact that I have the flexibility, right? Like on
Right.
Friday mornings, I take her to PT, right?
Hmm.
Or on Wednesday afternoons, I take her to her counseling session.
Hmm.
I'm the one, I have that ability to be able to do that, which I'm very, very grateful for in being an entrepreneur. With that being said, I also have help.
Hmm.
And, for my daughter, we get paid through the state, or I guess I should say, behavioral help gets paid through the state
Hmm.
um, in order to provide for that. Right.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
we have someone that we rely on 2 days a week to pick her up from school, take her to therapies, take her to activities, etc. And I didn't take advantage of that when she was really little.
Mm.
Right. Like when she was really little, I was doing it all. We were going to like I burnt
Yeah.
out,
Hmm.
at a certain point. Like, and I remember someone saying that to me, like they're like, you're gonna burn out. And I was like, it's for my daughter. Like, I'm just gonna keep, whatever, da da da. And then I did. And I was like, I don't want to do
Yeah.
any of this. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Even though I knew it was beneficial to her. So of course I did. I got rid of like a couple things, that were more fun than like speech therapy. You know what I mean? The things that
Yeah.
we like needed to be doing week in and week out. And so once I really leaned in and realized like, okay, there is help there that I can
Hmm.
get from people that are trained
Hmm.
to work with individuals that might
Hmm.
have these types of needs.
Hmm.
And then I'm kind of going off intuition, right?
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
meeting them and I'm being like, okay, do I think this is going to be the right fit,
Hmm.
for her, the right fit for us as a family, et cetera. We've been really lucky to have some great help over the years. And that has made all the difference, for
Hmm.
me. And so I'm a big believer in like outsourcing help where you can, right? And
Hmm.
where it makes sense. There's going to be times it doesn't.
Hmm.
But the times that it does, like, we have a house cleaner, we have these other things because A, I don't want to do it, but B, like, that's also multiple hours of time
Hmm.
that is being handled and taken care of, for me when I could be making money, right? Or I could
Right.
be on a podcast, or I could be working on something for my business.
Hmm.
And so I think it's important to like my next thing is I want to get someone that does like meal prep for us. That's like my next move that I want to make,
Yeah. Right.
is to do that because I don't mind the cooking. I just
Hmm.
hate doing all the like prep for it.
Planning and yeah.
Exactly, exactly. But if it's prepped, me or my husband can do it,
Yeah.
but it's just like, okay, knowing what that is. And so I think for me, that's been like a big thing as a parent, as a
Mhm.
mompreneur, is
Mhm.
realizing like you can't do it all. Like,
Mhm.
so how do you find the support that you need? Because we don't have family near us. I'm sure there's a lot of
Right.
listeners that can relate to that.
Oh yeah.
So how are we making that work? How are we making that happen? So
Mhm.
that I do have the time to make this work.
Mhm. And I think it's really inspiring that you're not sitting there saying, because of this, I can't do my business. I can't,
Yeah. Yep.
and so many times I talk to, women who are just stuck and thinking it's going to be
Hmm.
too hard. Um, so, I mean, was there a point that you had to overcome that, or were you just like, I have to make this work and I'm going to figure it out?
Yeah, I guess I would say the latter.
Yeah.
I definitely was more like, I got to figure out how this works for me and how I'm going to do
Mhm.
this, right?
Mhm.
There was never really a point where I was like, I'm done, like I can't do this. It was just
Mhm.
more of like, what does this then look like in
Mm.
reality? And by the way, that changes through the seasons, right? Like
Yeah,
that was different when she was pre
sure.
going to school,
I
right?
know.
Versus now being in school all day, five
Yeah.
days a week. Like I
Mhm.
have the ability to have that flexibility there. Whereas when she was
Mhm.
2 years old, 3 years, like that's not gonna that wasn't ever gonna look the same. And that's when I was
Mhm.
mainly just doing my consulting work that I
Mhm.
was doing when she was at daycare a couple days a week, right?
Mhm.
Um, so for me, I have never thought about not working.
Yeah.
That is something that I've needed for myself,
Mhm.
for my brain, for everything to just kind of be able to do what I want to do.
And it gives you the
Um,
flexibility, right? That
gives
you
me the
absolutely have to
flexibility.
have.
Exactly, that we have to have, and quite frankly, just the knowledge of like you can take care of yourself if you need to, right?
Right.
That's an important thing. I'm married, and stuff like that, but I think I've always known in my mind like you have to have that ability to be like, you know what? I'm out. Like if need be, right? And then you need to be able to I wanted to you also kind of need to know like what that might look like.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think you've given us so many great reminders about the power of podcasting and how to think strategically and intentionally about it. And I love that you're sharing about being a mompreneur, because I think we want to support one another and remind each
Yes.
other, that we can succeed,
Yep.
and we need to be supporting one another, and
100%. I will
regardless.
say
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
will say almost all my publicists are moms, or all the members of
Yeah.
my team are moms. I think we have one that isn't. And
Hmm.
I love to have
Oh,
moms on my
yeah.
team because y'all know this, but moms get shit done. Like they have these particular hours that they are available to do what
Yeah.
they're going to do. And so they are making it happen during that
Hmm.
time, right? And so I absolutely think that it is such a strength to be a mom because
Hmm.
you just learn time management like nobody can
Hmm.
believe it because
Oh,
you're like,
yeah.
I got this time. I don't want to be working at night. I don't want to be doing this other stuff. So like, what does it look like for me to get things done during this
Right.
time? And that doesn't mean
Right.
that I'm never working at night or I'm never working sometimes on a weekend or something like that, but I really do try to get it done during that time.
Hmm. No, and I love that reminder too, that we're not entrepreneurs in spite of being a mom. We're pre-qualified
A
to be an
hundred percent. Oh, I
entrepreneur.
love that. Yes, we're pre-qualified. Exactly. Like everything has taught us how to do this, right?
Right.
Like, we've kind of been trained almost in this way by our kids of like, this is our time to do just that. And so know that
Right.
it's a strength, it's a
Yeah.
superpower. And,
Hmm.
you know, um, we really do get so much done in the limited
Hmm.
amount of time that we might have. And
Yeah.
like for me, I mean, just like many of your people, I have a wonderful partner that is also a huge part of my child's
Hmm.
life,
Hmm.
but it's still a lot. You still only have these certain amount of hours in the day
Right.
to do it. And,
Yeah.
especially when your kid's in school, you really only have the night with
Right.
them,
Hmm.
and you don't
Hmm.
want to be working for at least most of the time,
Hmm.
during that. So you're like, you find out ways of like, how can I do this even more efficiently, even better? etc.
Right.
So that I can, yeah, get faster.
Yeah, right. I love that, Christina. If you wanted to leave listeners with a takeaway or a few takeaways, what would that be?
You can do this. I'm dead
Absolutely.
serious. There are so
Yeah.
many of y'all out there that I know are listening to this and are like, I would never do that. You know, like they're like, I would never guest on a podcast. That is insane. Like I can't even imagine what would I say, what would I do, you know, da 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 da.
Right.
And I am here to tell you that you can absolutely do that. People do want to hear from you. You don't need to have
Hmm.
been on like a TEDx stage and have a
Yeah.
best-selling, you know, book and da 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 da. By the way, I don't have either of those things. You
Yeah.
hear me on here jabbering away. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, you absolutely can do this. And you know,
Hmm.
people say like, well, what if I say the wrong thing? And Angela and I were actually talking about this beforehand. It's like these hosts aren't out to get you. If you say
Yeah.
something wrong, if you mess up something
No.
that you are saying, you can just say, "Hey, I'm sorry. I didn't like my answer to that. Do you mind just
Yeah.
asking me that question again?" And I'm
Hmm.
just going to do it again. All right. 99% of the shows that you're going to be on are not live. Okay.
Right.
So, and by
Oh,
the way, if
yeah.
it is live, maybe don't have that be your first show that you go on. Okay. Um, uh, and I think that that's like a big thing to remember is like you will have the
Hmm.
opportunity to kind of redo it again if need be. The
Hmm.
other thing is people get like, well, I don't want to talk in front of all these people. You're not talking in front of all these people. You are having a one-on-one conversation with someone. Like I'm just
Right.
having a conversation with Angela. No one's listening in to us right now. Y'all are going to hear this later on, but I'm not in front of a crowd of. That's actually why most of our
Hmm.
clients are I almost said entrepreneurs. That's not right. Are introverts,
Hmm.
because this is how they actually like to do their marketing because they like having just a conversation, right? I
Right.
mean, there's extroverts
Hmm.
like me, we love it either way, but there's a lot of introverts out there and they love doing this type of work because,
Yeah.
again, they love having a conversation. That to
Yeah.
them is very real and like what
Hmm.
they actually enjoy.
Hmm.
But really, what I think the worst thing that can happen is, you know, when people get worried about it, is you not doing it. And I
Hmm.
truly, truly mean that
Yeah.
because we talked about it earlier, but your
Yeah.
business will not grow if you
Right.
are not getting in front of new audiences regularly. And
Hmm.
podcasts are one of the easiest ways for you to be getting out in front of new audiences, just doing it from your home, you know, it
Hmm.
only taking a couple out, you know, an hour for the interview. And if you're doing the pitching yourself, some time obviously on the front end there.
Hmm.
Um, but like get out there, do it. You're going to sweat and stumble your way through your first couple interviews that you do.
Hmm.
Everybody does. Everybody does. But once you get through those, you're going
Yeah.
to feel really comfortable in front of the mic, feel really good, and you're going to see your business start to grow.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you so much, Christina. It's been such a great conversation. I know listeners are going to want to connect with you because you're so passionate and you have demonstrated how much podcasting can really just explode your business. So, where
Mhm.
can they connect with you?
Yeah, you can come find me over at podcastpublicityquiz.com.
Hmm.
We have a quiz there that'll direct you to kind of what might make the most sense for where you are in your business, whether that's
Hmm.
learning how to pitch yourself or whether that is having our team take it on for you. You know, that just kind of depends on kind of where you are in your business and what you're
Hmm.
looking to do.
Hmm.
But I do have a full training called Hey Bitch, Let's Pitch. That's all about building up your pitch template and really getting yourself out there. I know the name's funny, but it is something people remember all the time.
Right.
But that's a really great way to kind of get started with
Uh-huh.
this work. If you're like, okay, what does this look like? How do I research shows? What does an actual pitch look like?
Hmm.
That is the perfect training for you, and the quiz will guide you to that.
Yeah. And as somebody who receives hundreds and hundreds, gosh, the pitches, oh, if you could get that right and do it strategically and
Yes. Well,
well,
Angela, you've had multiple of our clients on your show, so
yeah,
you know what those pitches can look like when they're done well. They stand out from the
exactly.
rest of the most pitches,
Yeah.
y'all, are not good. Like any podcast host can kind of tell you. So when you
No.
do it at a really high level, when you have it, you know, dialed in, it's going to get
Yeah.
noticed.
Yeah, I recently received one about a dad who was divorced and wrote a book for divorced dads, and I'm like, not really sure how that resonates. We could
Or
talk
if
for
like
ages.
Or if you think it does resonate, make that connection for them, right?
Right.
Like say like, hey, I know
Exactly.
your show focuses on this. We had a book on,
Right.
here's how I think it could still be of value to your
Oh
audience,
yeah.
right? Like that's okay, but you are
Yeah.
essentially when you pitch yourself to these podcasts,
Right.
like you are making the case, you are
Yeah.
applying
Yeah.
essentially with why you are going to bring
Right.
value to their show.
Yeah. And like no links, no, it's just like, oh, she survived from cancer. Do you think she'd be a great guest? And I'm like, I don't know who this
You're like,
person
I don't
is.
know, maybe with a little bit more info, I could find out. Yeah.
Yeah, or if I have one guest on one topic, I'll get like five other pitches just on that topic on the same thing.
Mm,
And it's
yeah.
like, oh,
Yeah. So let this all be just as a
yeah,
little sales plug for myself. We
right?
don't do it like that, y'all. So that
Yeah,
training is going to tell you how to do it in the way that is going to get hosts to be like, yes, I need to have them
right.
on. I want to have them on. This is a great pitch, right?
Yeah.
And this it truly does come from the fact that I worked in PR for so long
Hmm.
before I did this, getting my clients booked on, in major magazines and on TV shows and all these things. We pitch at that same level. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? Like that's the way that we pitch. And so um you can get yourself booked on shows from your home office. You just need to be thoughtful about it and
Hmm.
just have it done in a way that hosts are going to resonate with.
Right. No, I love it. Such a valuable conversation. Thank you, Christina, for
Thank
being on
you.
the podcast. I'm going to leave links, the link that you mentioned in the show notes below. And so thank you
Perfect.
so much.
All right. Thanks,
Yeah.
Angela.
All right.